Alrighty.
All right, we're live. Perfect.
Hello, everybody out there in internet land. Welcome to Top Deck Heroes.
Yep. We're back at our
I'm your
normal
host,
time. Oh yeah, I'm your host, Kevin Broberg.
and Sean O'Brien at Rochester CCG. Go ahead, Kevin Broberg.
Yeah, so we're back to our normal time and place on every Wednesday night. Once again, we've finished our set review of the new Mega Man Battle for Power set, and we're just going to talk about whatever catches our fancy.
We're going to go crazy. It's a mad night. Anything goes because we didn't write a schedule. Well,
Yeah. So what's in the news these days, Sean?
I guess we'll start at the top of the hour with the news like we normally do. And I think the biggest piece of news is that stores started having their pre-releases last week for Battle for Power. I've heard nothing but good things about the set. And overall, I think players are pretty happy. I didn't get to play in our pre-release due to a work commitment. But Kevin Broberg, tell us a little bit about your experience.
Oh yeah, so we had 9 players, which was pretty good. We got to see Ryan Field, 1/3 of roster CCG, the championship from Team Nationals, Team Worlds, no Team Nationals,
Team Nationals,
yeah, from last year, which is significantly far in the past now, but still reigning Team National champion. He hasn't been out very much because he has a regular work commitment overnights on after Friday night. But he came out to draft. We got 9 people and we had a good time. We just did a 9-man draft pod with 6 packs each. I drafted a Dr. Wily deck that was both death and water after starting out with some Slashman cards. I got 9 capsule zaps, and turns out that card is not fair, not remotely fair. I went toe-to-toe with a couple of constructed decks.
Yeah, I saw after I did arrive eventually to the event, and I saw that there were some interesting decks. Looked like there was a Napalm Man, a Turbo Man, several Turbo Mans. There was it One Sword Man?
Yeah, a couple people had like multiple characters in their deck, like they could switch, which is completely possible because every character has 2 symbols that share 3 neighbor characters. So like there's 4 characters with water. And there's 4 characters with death, and so if you have a death and water deck, you can anyway. So yeah, I know there was at least one base. I think Sonic was either starting or siding into Napalm Man. I know there were at least 2 Turbo Men. Ben played Tomahawk Man and went 2-0-1. I went 3-0 with Dr. Wily. Giggles had a Swordman deck that had something like 37 weapons out of 40 cards. And I beat him in the last round. We were playing for 3-0, and I managed to win that one. My deck had about like 25 allies or something, which is not quite as good as Sword. I mean, it's different than Swordman because Swordman gets to cycle on every attack. With Dr. Wily, I got to trigger premeditated. I got to play 9 premeditated attacks, and that one's fair because that card's not very good. But whenever I'd blow it up, I'd get to either draw a card or replace it about bit more than half the time, so it's kind of cool.
Seems really good. So that happened over the weekend. Overall, like I said, everyone seems to be pretty good. Also in the news, Jasco Games, in the form of Shane Duckworth, did drop some hints that there are going to be some additional cards reprinted in Blood Omen from the earlier Red Horizon sets. Yep, I think I saw a hint, know your objective or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. He dropped a bit of knowledge in one of the forum threads about the future of the game. We should be getting a state of the game here in the near future to coincide with our new release. And he said he gave a lot of people some blue balls, I think, suggesting that the ban list would be changed, and then letting everyone know that the ban list changes would be removing the cards which are rotating out of standard, which are currently banned. So all of the cards like Blazing Storm and Directing Empire that were banned for quality of life issues when they returned to standard last time. Although it's entirely possible they just changed their mind on that front too. We'll have to see when the state of the game does release.
Yeah, and we're hoping that does happen pretty soon. I know last time we got a state of the game, we had to go after them with our torches and pitchforks for a couple of weeks, and then we finally got one that was, hey, we're staying the course, and we'll talk to you in like 6 months. I mean, overall, I think transparency is a little better ever since Shane started working at Jasco Games, because I do feel like he maintains a better social media presence for Jasco than not having anyone at all.
Yeah, it used to be you'd see a Jasco Games employee post on the forums once in a blue moon, and everyone kind of wet the bed as soon as that happened. But Shane comes on, pretty frequently and chimes in on a lot of different things.
Hmm. So I think those are the really major pieces of news. And we still don't have any prize support for our weekly
Yeah.
events, which is not good because in 6 days we have had as many months without prize support as we have had with prize support this year.
Oof.
And it makes it really difficult to support your local organized play if especially for the longest time without the new set being out, there was no reason to show up for your weekly tournaments. And depending on your local store's tournament structure, those prize promos may be the only reason people show up. Fortunately, here in Rochester, we all chip in $5 every week and buy packs from the store to give out for people depending on their placement in rounds. But
Yep.
I know not all stores do that.
Yeah, a lot of people prefer just kind of an open league format, and then everyone gets promos, but that doesn't make any sense at all when there's no promos to be had.
Or the same promos to be had, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So, I'm really hoping that changes soon. I think people will be coming back to the stores that do hand out packs because, for the first time in, 14 months, we have packs to hand out, which is really, really good. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, having new product is always amazing, and in this case, I think the set's is absolutely chock full of cards that you'll want to open and you'll be excited to get more of, even if you already have a playset. Uh, so speaking of already having playsets of things, I want to move on to our theme of the night.
Yes, the theme of the night. What was that again, Kevin Broberg?
All right, so we didn't have much to talk about tonight, and we decided let's talk about diversity, everyone's favorite topic in the UFS community. Uh,
Definitely the most controversial topic, I think.
Yeah, right up there, along with they should ban this, no, they shouldn't, yes, they should, etc. Everyone loves to talk about diversity and how it affects them personally, how it affects everyone else, because apparently that everyone is an authority on how everyone else sees the game, what different groups of players are most affected or least affected, and yeah, I think it's just kind of dive right in. So obviously, diversity is just that if you are not familiar, somehow watching this show but not a super veteran UFS player, diversity is a rule that the only players in the single elimination rounds, top 8, are the players who have the highest ratings amongst the people with that playing that character. So if someone else is playing your character, you get eliminated in favor of 9th place or 10th place or whatever, and it goes down from there. So diversity is someone who is. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so officially, if in the tournament floor rules, the things they look at, because there is a certain criteria for being eliminated. So it goes as follows: if the players playing the same character played in rounds, the player who lost, if a winner was determined, the player who lost is the first to get cut. After that, if they didn't play in rounds or a winner wasn't determined, it goes to your score, the Swiss score, followed by your strength of schedule, then your number of round wins. And then if for some reason you're tied after all those things, you get an untimed playoff match.
Yep. So,
which should hopefully never happen.
Yeah, hopefully not. I guess there's also a provision where you can pair the last round to have those untimed playoff matches, or to have the playoff matches occur during the last round.
That provision actually was removed from the last tournament floor rules, if I remember correctly.
Well, in any case, diversity, it's stated goals. Its name is diversity, and the goal is to increase the pool of viable characters, the pool of character cards rather, which people will be interested in registering in a tournament. So if you imagine kind of rating all of the characters in UFS on tiers, where the A tier is the best tier and like the F tier is the worst tier, you might in kind of without diversity, or so the story goes, people would never sign up with anything except for the A tier, the people who give them the best chance to, the characters rather, who have the best chance to win, and the B tier, C tier, D tier would go completely unexplored and unused. Diversity means that if there's only 4 characters in the A tier, it's guaranteed that there are going to be 4 characters to fill in the rest of the top 8, or 12 characters in the case of a top 16, uh, who aren't in that A tier, that highest tier of the best characters in the game. So that increases diversity that way. And also, I mean, as an implication of that, to prepare for tournaments where diversity will be enforced, there's an incentive to play kind of weird offbeat characters because hopefully you'll be the only person in the room playing that character, the only person who gets a good record with that character.
Yeah, but let's talk a little bit about the strengths and weaknesses, of diversity. And I think and I experienced this recently, so maybe I'm a little saltier than normal about it. But I know that I went to the Atlanta PTC, which was the largest PTC that we've had ever under Jasco Games, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah,
and
it was a great event.
Before the PTC, I was discussing with a couple people, Slam and Piglet and Keenan Meadows, about how we were all going to show up and play Life, right? Except for Piglet, who didn't. But a whole bunch of us were going to show up and play Life because we thought it was the best symbol in the format right now. And so, they're talking about, I'm just going to play Garrett. This person's going to play Snake Man. And then Keenan and I both found out that we were both playing Dimitri.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's an incentive because Keenan Meadows is a pretty good player. At least he used to be. Man, I don't really want to play diversity against Keenan Meadows because, he may have a better record than me. And I don't think I'm a bad player, but, Keenan Meadows is under the same threat as well. So going into the tournament, I feel like it may discourage people from playing the character that they want to play, in favor because, a high-profile player says they're going to play that character. I think somebody who felt like they were going to make a serious, deep tournament run would be turned off from playing, let's say, Felicia if Kevin Broberg announced, I'm going to show up and play Felicia this weekend.
Well,
because
it's kind of funny, actually. I went into that tournament expecting, knowing, whatever, that Phil Birch would be playing it as well, and I respect Phil Birch a lot as a player. The Michigan crew is all really good. He's won champ cards before. He's won plenty of matches, and he was playing the same character, and I knew that there would probably be more Felicias than that even signing up. And as it turned out, there were actually 3 of them tied for top 8 or better.
That being said, I think Felicia's kind of an outlier. She's not an A tier character. She's an S tier character. She's the level beyond the normal scale. But let's say, for example, you were thinking about playing, some sort of mid tier character. Let's say, you really, really like Terry Bogart, and you've been tinkering with this Terry Bogart for months, and then you find out that Miles Tyler is going to go to the tournament. Now, Miles Tyler has been playing Terry Bogart since the beginning of time. And so your chances of getting diversified by Miles, are pretty high. He's likely to perform well. He consistently makes top 8 at PTCs. And so you may be discouraged from playing the character you want to because maybe you make a deep run and then all of a sudden, because you had the misfortune of stuff that can even be out of your control, such as, bad pairings, pair downs, getting a bye first round, or, your opponent's dropping things out of your control, you might miss elimination. And so, back to my story with Keenan, we had the misfortune of being paired round 2, Dimitri versus Dimitri, and the longest, most miserable going to time match ever. And about 5 minutes before time was called, I ran out of cards in my deck. I lost. And with only 5 minutes left in the round, Dimitri's aren't going to finish. And so over one game, no matter how well I did for the rest of the day, I could have won out. And it was impossible for me to make elimination because I had played the other Dimitri and lost.
Well, so as Keenan kept winning, yeah.
Well, no. As long as if Keenan was to make elimination, I'd automatically been out.
Right.
Because we played in rounds. And so he could have gone 6-0, and I could have gone 5-1, and a bunch of 4-2s would have gotten in anyhow. So, that's the thing that makes people really salty about diversity, I think. I know one of our local players, Jay Clark, or Sonic, he likes to be called, went to the Rochester PTC, and his favorite character, his pet character, Natali, was finally really tournament playable with the addition of Dragon Flare. And he came in 3rd place playing his favorite character that he's been playing ever since the Angels got well, ever since Omniel was banned.
Yeah.
And because, Slam had shown up and did just a smidgen better, the first time a player would have made elimination, didn't get to play.
Yeah.
Got a
So
constellation pack of 6 Darkstalkers 10 packs.
yeah. So in that tournament, they actually went and combined. It was 6 rounds, 6 Swiss rounds. They went combined 11-1. Sonic lost the mirror, and Sonic got. He didn't even get the set of steak knives for second place. He got ninth place, with I think my brother sneaking in at like 3-1-2 somehow or something like that,
Yeah, it
and
was.
a dramatically worse record. And so, and I think that's actually a really good example because for that tournament, Natali wasn't an S tier character. It was like they were both playing completely different decks. On top of that, there really is a catch 22 with diversity. I think as you improve as a player, when you first start, like when you're a bad player, you go to a tournament just to learn. You don't have a shot of top eighting. Then you improve and improve, and eventually you're at a point where you might make a deep run, pick a good deck for the weekend, and now make top eight. And it actually makes your life a little easier because there's probably you need to get to ninth or 10th place to make tops because of diversity happening at the top tables. Then as you
Mhm.
improve further, though, you reach the point where you might, you start like metagaming and picking, like finding good characters, good decks, and then, you're collaborating with a lot of other people, and the people you're collaborating with have the same ideas as you do, and they might pick the same character as you, or they might, especially with it's really awful when you build a new deck and randomly run into diversity for the same thing. Um, and then as you improve further beyond that, you reach the point where you're only playing for first place, and top eight is just a step on the road rather than an achievement in and of itself. And at that point, you have to win a whole lot anyway. You have to be able to beat 3 people after you reach single elimination. Uh, you just want to play the best character anyway, and it doesn't matter. Diversity doesn't affect your decision at all. That's really how I felt going into that PDC. I don't care if people are playing Felicia. I don't I don't want to sabotage myself by sandbagging, which we should talk about too. Um, and I'm just going to play Felicia, and I'm going to try to win the tournament. Mirror matches and diversity be damned. I'm here for first
Mhm.
place, and so like that. But that range when you're not quite at the point where you feel confident about, like you feel that you have a good shot to win the whole thing. Period. That's where diversity can become harmful because if you're not being the cutting edge of creativity, or you're not kind of staking a flag and saying get out of my way everybody unless you want to get run over by this freight train, uh, and say like clear out of the diversity train from me, um, then you can really just like miss out on tournament results.
Yeah. And I think those points are absolutely clear. And clearly, folks out there in listening land, you can see where Kevin Broberg and I kind of fit on this scale here of whether or not diversity is good or not. And overall, I think diversity can be very harmful because if you're not on the cutting edge of deck building and innovating, and you're learning how to play UFS and you're just learning how to become a better player, chances are pretty good you're going to troll around on the forums and try to play what's good. And if you're new to the game and your first experience is I found this deck that's really good, I traveled 3 hours to a PTC, or even worse, you traveled across the country to Worlds, and you had the misfortune of Kevin Broberg playing the same character as you, and he did better,
Yeah, how about
and
how
you
about
make it
we
to your.
talk about a great example of this? So this last year at Worlds in Las Vegas, it was cut to top 16 with single diversity, so only one player in 16 could reach single elimination, and I believe there were 3 players with Kim in that single elimination, including I believe Clint Badger and Dan Hughes probably. And
Hmm.
then I feel like one of the Kims was kind of an unknown, or maybe he was like just on the bubble. But then the player who actually made top 16 with this, who got through the diversity scrum, was Devin Bernier, international UFS playboy from like part of the Calgary crew, playing an anti Kim deck. Um, in this case, it was cool because he was playing a different build. It was radically different. It was the order symbol instead of the common water, but Kim is a great character to kind of pick up the ropes of UFS with. It's a deck that kind of builds itself to somewhat of an extent. You play all these kicks together. It kind of teaches you how to do like threat evaluation, how to do like what a good kill turn looks like, and I think that like to bootstrap yourself into being a competitive player, you need to have a good deck. It's really hard to build your own decks to the point of actually being competitive. Like we've seen the evolution of Miles's Terry deck, and I think it's probably fair to say that he's the best player in Omaha, but he has to go to these major PTCs and get bopped by people who have a bigger understanding of the game than what he did at the time where he was getting bopped, and then he can kind of grow as a player that way. But to bootstrap yourself up without that is extremely difficult. But bootstrap yourself up without net decking at all, without talking to anyone on the forums, just saying I'm going to improve through my own, just purely sweat off my own deck, is basically impossible. You can't reach the top competitive level that way.
Unless you're playing a shitload of UFS.
Yeah.
You got to be playing more UFS, I think, than most players do.
Yeah, definitely. So, like, I think that... Crap, where was I coming from? So I think that there are decks you can build and try to like build yourself up as a player from, but the diversity system means that you can't bring those decks to tournaments. You can't learn from... What is going on in our chat? Sean, you look like Tony Montana, I guess?
Okay. Unfortunately, I don't know who that is.
Oh, man. Oh.
If you keep getting sidetracked, I'm just going to steal you and talk about my own diversity thing.
Yeah, if you want to take it over. I mean, I think I got lost in my own point, so...
Yeah, and I think that's part of, the unhealthiness of diversity. It does punish people for going out and, looking at decks that have done really well and then just aren't. You build this deck that plays really well and you make it into top cuts of a tournament, and then you just don't get to play. You're punished for trying to play the best UFS. And the idea, I guess, behind it is to keep, a whole bunch of spikes from showing up. And everybody shows up, they spike it out, they play Felicia, and, the elimination rounds is 7 Felicias and the random Dimitri who snuck in.
Yeah,
and
so, yeah, like, the idea of Spike is that it's competitive players, people who came to win rather than sort of to experience the whole depth of the game, or so the story goes. And, like, there's a concern that Spikes ruin the game for people who aren't Spikes, who aren't competitive players. But I think that's just misplaced, honestly. I guess we can't... It's tough to put words in people's mouths, but, like, competitive... Like, the reason we have tournaments is for competitive play. And if we try to push the competitive players out with a diversity rule that randomly eliminates them, just kind of makes people not show up to tournaments, right?
Yeah, and I experienced this. I was talking to a UFS player who started playing who had played Magic, and he told me, like, the worst thing about the game is knowing that he could show up for a tournament, play the best deck in the room, get a pair down or lose randomly to your meta deck, lose once all day, and fail the top cut, and fail to get to play an elimination despite being potentially the second best player in the room. And that did happen. That happened at... Worlds, where you and Shane played as Kate. Was it K-Dash?
Yeah, there was K-Dash.
You guys ended up.
Yeah, we were we got paired up at 5-0, and then we had to play we played the final round of Swiss against each other at the undefeated table, the best records by far in the room. We unintentionally drew because time ran out in the round during Game 3, and then due to tiebreakers. I was first place, he was second place, and that's how it was decided which one of us would be in top 8 with a full win over anyone else in the tournament.
Yeah, I think that's it's horseshit. If you play the best all day and you're the second best person in the room, you should get to play. You should get to play for the best prize, and that takes away from UFS. I think it takes away from the experience. I mean, we ran a tournament, a major tournament that was no diversity at the Las Vegas 2K. And granted, it wasn't the turnout that we were looking for. However, it didn't ruin the tournament that everybody could just show up playing who they wanted to play. The room wasn't just 8 Felicias, 8 Dimitris, and 8 whatever else is the best thing in the room, and then you just lose. It was two or three Dimitris, 2 Felicias, and overall, I think the tournament didn't suffer because of it.
Yeah, I know that top
One
eight
guy
was
was
still
bitching and moaning. He had to. There was no diversity. It
yeah,
had
the
their
top
back.
eight was still 8 distinct archetypes. I think the big thing with diversity rule is that it's inherited from an old time when the format wasn't as good as it is.
Hmm.
Sorry, I just
And
totally cut you off
worry.
and changed the subject. If you had more to say about the 2K.
No, I think that's it. And I think diversity is actively bad for the format. One of the things that I've heard folks say is, "Oh man, the format's so great. Look at all these different decks that made top 8." And I feel like that's not very relevant if you cut to a top 16 and you have to go almost 10 places beyond 16 to get 16 different decks in.
Yeah, I think
That's a
Worlds is
sign that
23rd
there's
place.
a problem.
And yeah, it's really. I think that top 16 with only one like there are not 16 archetypes in the room that are equally good. Like that's just a falsehood. That's not how it works. There can be 16 matchups that are like you might have 16 like specific pairings that can be close or 8 pairings that can be close, but at the end of the day, like when 100 people sign up, like there are more than 16 decks that are better than like there are fewer than 16 decks that are like head and shoulders above other ones. Uh, yeah, like
For
that's
sure.
like the S tier is not remotely that big, and the A tier is not big enough really to accommodate that either. It's like you can get there on the strength of outplaying people. You can get there on the strength of having good matchups here and there, but it really just introduces a huge random element of who's going to have the best run during Swiss to get there.
And the other thing that they say is if with diversity, people get into top cuts who otherwise wouldn't have. Which, yeah, I mean that feels good if you wouldn't have gotten into top cuts and you did, and then you get immediately demolished because the person who was Swiss champ got to play the person who came in 27th place,
Yeah.
which is going to become a bigger and bigger problem as UFS grows as a community. As our tournament's getting bigger, if we start having tournaments with 200 people, and let's say they decide to cut to a top 32 for some unknown reason, we're going to be cutting to like 80th or 90th place to get 32 unique characters. And even if we still stay at top 16, there are going to be more and more people playing those top tier decks, and you may be cutting to 30th place, 40th place to get 16 unique characters for a top 16. And that's incredibly bad. It feels really good if you're in 30th place and you get top 16 prize support. But who it feels really shitty for? The person who showed up to their first tournament and came in 15th place, and well, shucks, buddy, 4 people played the same character as you ahead of you. See ya.
Yeah, so I think like one thing to say about diversity is that it doesn't always achieve its goal of making people play different things. I know that one of the first tournaments that I ever attended, which was, or in the Jasco era, was Worlds 2012, I believe, at Gen Con. And in singles of that event, there were actually 3 of the same character in like the top 4 places after Swiss, playing on all 3 of his symbols, Marathi. And so diversity eliminated 2 of them with their completely distinct creative decks.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's a failure case on top of the other failure cases where if I'm some schmuck from wherever and I go to a PDC playing the best deck that I have at home, and let's say it's Felicia because she's a great starter deck and she's very good on her own, and then I have to wade into a pool of absolute sharks to ever be able to top 8 that, where my friend who's playing Gutsman or something can't just has to rattle off 3.5 wins and he's going to be locked. I think that one of the important things to remember about any kind of tournament decision like this, where some people get slots and other people don't, is that the prize payout is zero sum. So if you take away from one person, if you give something to one person to 10th place who gets into top 8, you have to necessarily take it away from someone else. And then you have to ask yourself, is what are we here to reward? We're a tournament, right? So obviously we want to reward people who win more because the goal of the game is to win. That's the whole point of a tournament. And then you have to ask, what other objectives do we want to give people, and how do we want to reward them, and to what extent do we want to reward them? How predictable do we want it to be, and that kind of questions. Diversity makes it so that winning is still rewarded. You still have to win to make top cuts, and then you have to win from top cuts to actually win the tournament. You have to win 3 rounds or 4 rounds to actually win, even if you skated in at 16th place. But to get there, almost all the time it's a tiebreaker struggle for one to see who's in 9th place to get that extra diversity slot. I just think it's a system that doesn't necessarily meet its goals.
Yeah, you bring up a really fair point. To give to 9th and 10th place, for people who sneak in on diversity, you have to take away from somebody who did better. And I mean, could you imagine if we were at the Olympics and you and I somehow made the Olympic team for running, and you came in first and I came in second, and you're like, well, shucks, since you're both from the United States, only one of you gets a medal.
Yeah.
We
have continental diversity. We want to have at least one runner from Asia and one from North America and one from Europe and one from Africa in each race. So sorry, second fastest runner here, you will not advance.
Yeah, in other situations that aren't UFS, it feels like nonsense. I mean, imagine if you had an auto race and you had to qualify to be in the race, and it's like, well, guys, since you both drive Fords, only one of you can get in. We got to make sure somebody driving a Studebaker gets in.
That's really funny on 2 levels. I think car racing is a great analogy, and that's kind of funny. And then it's also funny because they're driving Fords and they're apparently fast.
Well, I mean, that's how it works in racing. You have to qualify to get into the race, at least in NASCAR style racing.
Yep.
And could you imagine if only one of every type of car could get in?
Yeah, it'd be.
You would have people in Studebagers driving around the track. You'd have people in Volvos riding around the track. You'd have people, in just cars that aren't even supposed to be there racing around the track. Yeah. And I'm sorry, to some characters in UFS, but there are characters that aren't supposed to make top cuts that can't make top cuts, because of their inherent not goodness. And I'll throw it down there. If somebody can manage to get into a top cuts with Benny Morrow, who's not Kevin Broberg, I'll rescind that statement. But there are some characters that just aren't meant to be there.
You fucked up now, Sean O'Brien. I'm gonna eat my words. I'm gonna arm the populace with the best Benny Morrow decks.
But the point is, even if Benny Morrow is to sneak in on diversity, even if a Hyundai sneaks in to the race, they're going to lose to a McLaren. They're going to lose to a Lamborghini. They're faster. They're better. And oh boy, let's give the little Hyundai, a handout because, we only allowed one type of every other car in, so they get to race. They get to get a little extra prize. Good for them. At the detriment of not knowing what car is really the fastest, who's the best driver, because the 2 best drivers both happen to drive Lamborghinis. And we don't know if Lamborghinis are unfair because there's only one. They say, we try to keep the format fair by having diversity, and then we look at the deck reports. It's like, wow, only 8 decks ran, only 6 of the top 8 decks ran Summer Heat, except 2 of the decks that would have made top cuts that also ran Summer Heat were eliminated. But it feels good because Summer Heat's not a problem because only 6 of the decks ran it.
Well, so one thing that diversity does accomplish is it does provide you an incentive to zig when everyone else is zagging, to build an electric car rather than just driving the same old Lamborghini, and because the electric car might have an unexpected advantage on certain road surfaces or something, and you wouldn't ever sink in the R&D costs to build that electric car unless there were a rule like diversity, meaning that you could not have it be quite as perfected and still be able to make it in. And I think that's one of the goals of diversity too, is um, to get people because rather I'm actually approaching this the wrong way. If you imagine the experience of someone who's going to sign up for a tournament and have to play against drive against Lamborghinis every round, that could be pretty rough. And so
Hmm.
by seeding the tournament, by incentivizing people to build more electric cars, then everyone will have more fun because they get to have different matchups throughout the tournament, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing it's supposed to try to avoid. It's supposed to make it so you don't have to play Felicia, 5 out of your 6 rounds.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always fix it. And one thing we haven't really talked about so far is sandbagging.
Yeah, let's
Now,
talk
for
about
those of
that.
you unfamiliar with sandbagging, what that means is if you're playing a character that you expect to have strong diversity battles against, you may consider registering as a different character that can run a lot of the same cards and then sideboarding into the character that you actually want to run. This infamously happened when Mike Lowe won a tournament. Was it Canadian Nationals or U.S. Nationals with Chun Li, Nine Dot Chun Li, who we know was one of the most busted characters in history. And you'll find if you look at the old tournament report that there was a Chun Li and then there was a Felicia. But coincidentally, you'll find that the deck was almost the same and had a Chun Li in the sideboard. There was a Mignon. And almost half the top 8 were people playing other characters, sandbagging into Chun Li because she was the best thing out there. And I don't think that's as common as it used to be because overall, I don't think there are any characters that are so much better than the rest
Yeah.
of the field that you're better off starting as a different character and switching into her.
Yeah,
However, we did.
that's less common now also because the cards aren't as overpowered as Feline Spike was. Like if you want to build a deck that's sandbags into Dimitri, you have to make a lot more sacrifices in your game ones compared to when you could just play Feline Spike as anyone.
Right. And, it did happen recently, and we had when Hoitzel was legal for U.S. Nationals in 2015 rather, where a gentleman got into elimination playing as Caden, who immediately sideboarded into the other deck after losing his game 1.
Yeah, that was Void
And
Fusil. Yeah.
yeah, Void Hoitzel. And he said he lost most of his game 1s. He just had to deal with the fact that he could lose his first game, and his character was so busted he could move on to his second 2 games and win. However, that's not a viable option for a lot of decks. If I'm playing Kim, what viable option do I have to run a kick loop deck that's not Kim right now?
Yeah,
If I want to
have
sandbag,
nothing at all. Yeah.
it's just not possible. I mean, at least if you're trying to sandbag as Felicia, you can kind of get a workaround by playing Jiffany Jamber. You
There's
can
a
play.
giant pile of air symbol 7-hand size characters that can run a lot of the same things that Felicia does. They'll be a little bit
Mhm.
worse in a lot of matchups, but at the same time they'll have better matchups too.
Right. But I think a lot of decks that's not feasible. If you want to dodge Snake Man diversity, there are not many other characters you can run besides Snake Man for what the Snake Man deck's trying to do. Granted, overloading on low is really, really good. But turns out Murakumo only deals 2 when you don't have your character putting each move to, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Well, that's why you have to play Billy.
Billy's so bad.
Billy has amazing Murakumos.
Yeah, and you'll lose your first game every single time because
Billy
he's
is
Billy.
fantastic. I played Billy in a local and I had an amazing time. So back to diversity though. Rather than me talking about Billy, you're absolutely right. Sandbagging it's difficult, it's challenging, it's kind of rewarding in its own way, but at the same time it really isn't because it forces switching characters after sideboard is something that can only happen in a few circumstances where most of your deck is modular parts that don't rely on their character that much. And in circumstances where the format happens to support that for the best deck, such as arguably right now, if Airwall with Ever Hopeful and Nevos is the best deck, then that isn't bound to Felicia, even though Felicia is probably the best at it for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, you mean you can play Jiffany Jamber. Now the new set's out, you can play Turbo Man, Tengu Man,
Slash Man. So
Slash Man.
and when the format happens to be that way, where it is friendly to sandbagging, then that's just another case where diversity fails to accomplish its goals. Where you can play a tournament and get paired with a Felicia who didn't get the memo in round one. Then you can get paired with Jiffany Chamber in round two. Then you can get paired with the Felicia that's going to top in round three. And then get paired with Joe who's sandbagging into Felicia in round four. And that's not going to happen that often because it's even more difficult to build a successful sandbag deck than it is to just build a successful deck in the first place. But when it does, diversity has completely failed.
Yeah, and you could end up in a situation where you play Felicia all 6 rounds.
Yeah.
You just don't have to play her first game.
So I think it's like it's really important when we're talking about diversity to focus on what it tries to accomplish and not just like how we feel about it, because it has noble goals, right? The goal is to make the game more fun to play in tournaments, and like that's something we should all want. I like having fun more than I like winning at UFS. I have the most fun when I do both. Hey, like winning is great. I want to win, but I have the most fun when I'm also winning. Winning is the most fun. So, or rather, I have a lot of fun. I have a lot of anti-fun when I'm losing. That's really what it is. So,
yeah. I mean, diversity is trying to accomplish an important goal. I think we all agree that nobody wants to play against the same deck all 6 rounds.
Yeah, and I like it when I can feel like I'm not just making a mistake if I sign up with Mega Man instead of Felicia or Dimitri or something, where I can sign up with an off-the-wall like Natali 1-dot deck that's going to try to attack the meta from this completely bizarre angle, rather than just playing the best decks in the room.
Right. But, I mean, those people who are going to just play the best deck in the room, they're going to show up to every tournament. By the nature of it being a tournament, you want to win. You want to win as often as possible.
Yeah.
And, I feel like diversity takes away from the competitive nature of a tournament.
I agree completely, yeah. It takes it from how do I best win the game to how do I best exploit the rules for this game. Especially if we're going to talk about sandbagging or trying to find a deck that... And it actually even undermines the normal metagame features of a card game. If you say Felicia's the best deck, everyone loves playing Felicia, for some people who really want to win, they would rather get paired with 6 Felicias than get paired with 6 different decks. Because you can control how your Felicia matchup goes, to some extent anyway.
Right. I mean, overall, I think at the end of the day, I think Kevin and I are both against it, unless you disagree with me, Kevin. But, if we're going to be playing competitive UFS, especially at the world or national championship level, the 8 players who should be, or the 16 players who should be sitting in elimination, should be the 16 best players in the room.
Yes.
That's how you determine who the best player in the world is who played the best. And to have a tournament that the person who could potentially have been the second best player in the world doesn't even get a shot, I think actually destroys the integrity of competitive play.
Yeah, I agree that at the end of the day, it's about competition, and we should be seeking to make it a competitive endeavor. That should be the clear goal of everything, is to make it about who can do the best at UFS. Because I think UFS is an incredibly skill-tested game. The better player wins a lot of the time, but not always. And there's a lot of factors into it.
Right. And, and I think what I would call on JASCO Games to do to improve their tournament structure, especially involving diversity, I think they should eliminate diversity at the highest level of play in singles for nationals and the world championship. If you want to foster people being innovative and playing different decks, that's great at regional or PTC level play or at local play. Rewarding people who innovate, who don't show up to their local card shop every single week and beat up all their friends with Felicia and drive them away. Because the people who are going to be driven away from UFS because, they have to play the same characters always, aren't the same players who are going to go play in the National World Championship usually. They're not the people who are going to shell out $400 to fly across the country, shell out another $400 to get a hotel room to play UFS. They're the ones who are there who are going to win who are going to play and have fun and try to win no matter what happens.
And well, I think too, there's a very real group of people who go to a big event for the experience of playing it, not expecting to win necessarily. And for those people, it's about going and being there, being present for the very best players duking it out, and to sign up and take their shot, but not having expectations of winning it all. And I think that it's really hard to have expectations to win it all, especially with like a 200-player tournament, because before you like identify yourself as a great player or whatever, if it were a random drawing, you'd have a less than a 1% chance. I think this topic might actually be complex enough that a show just doesn't make sense for it. I think maybe it should happen I think the forums might be a great place to discuss this. Facebook might be a great place to discuss this. Reddit might be a great place to discuss this, because then we can keep track of all of the different kind of lines of reasoning, all of the different ways to look at the problem. Because there are a lot of ways to look at this problem. There are a lot of ways to experience UFS and to make it the best it can be. I think that running diversity at local events, at PTC level events, is a great idea, and that I think that perhaps having the World Championships have the rules relaxed, have this particular rule turned off for the sake of the highest level of competition. I think that could make a lot of sense.
So we'll see what they do about it. I know the powers that be really, really like diversity. Don't know why. But that's my challenge to them. Give it a try. I mean, we tried it. We tried a no diversity tournament in Las Vegas back in May, and nothing bad happened. The game didn't collapse. 27 Dimitris didn't register for the tournament. It was like a normal tournament, except if you played the mirror in one of the rounds, you didn't just automatically lose for the day.
Yep.
You didn't find out round 2 that your day was over, because you had the misfortune of playing, a person running the same character as you, and you lost. So that's my challenge to them. They could take it or leave it, but that's what I would do to solve the age-old diversity problem. Is, for players who are going to be most affected by dealing with spikes, okay, great rule for lower level play. But if you're going to play in the national and world championship to determine if you're the best in the world, then you should play against the best in the world in elimination. And that's my piece on it.
Yep. Absolutely agree.
So, speaking of competitive play, we do have some events coming up here in the near future. This coming weekend is the last event where Red Horizon is going to be legal at the Amsterdam PTC at Professor Bond's Emporium. Now, by my tally, at least 9 people from Rochester are going. I got 2 people I've heard are coming down from Buffalo. So Amsterdam and Poughkeepsie had better scrape together 9 more players to make sure we can count this for an event. And I do know some boys are coming up from Maryland and Pennsylvania area. So I'm pretty excited about that. I like seeing everybody, and it's an event I could actually go to.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to see all of my upstate New York family.
In September, we got 2 PTCs coming up. The 10th and 11th at the Abilene PTC at Rick's Collectibles. That's going to be the first PTC which Red Horizon has rotated out, and Battle for Power is legal. So I think we're going to see a lot of innovation at that event. Especially, I'm sure Omaha's going to be going down, and I wonder, is Miles going to stick with his guns and play Terry again, or do you think he's going to move on to someone new?
Well, Terry definitely got some toys in this set, so.
And based on some pictures I've seen of him getting ready to play with his new King of Fighters 14 game, I think he's going to be on a Terry kick there at that event. So we might see some innovation. We're sure going to see some innovation on the symbols that really made out well in the new set. Just a couple weeks after that is the Warren PTC in Michigan. That event is always extremely competitive. It's probably the 3rd or 4th largest gathering of champions of the year after Atlanta and Nationals and Worlds. So I think there's going to be a lot of really tough competition there. And, people are going to, at that point, I think just about have their bearings straight on what the format is now, with the new cards. In October, We've got 3 events in October. The Santa Clara PTC in California, October 8th and 9th at Game Castle. October 14th through 16th at the Holiday Inn in Atlanta, Georgia is U.S. Nationals. So they'll be determining who the best player is for the United States in both the team format, best team, and the best singles player, which will be Kevin Broberg.
The dream.
Dream.
I decided when I win this one, my next card's gonna be Nigel Thornberry face. Because of a big nose.
All right. Just a couple weeks after that is the New Orleans PTC at Go4 Games. Now, this may be the first event where Blood Omen is legal. But they may decide to push that out because Blood Omen comes out, I believe, in the 20-something of October.
Gosh, this new set turnover is so fast.
I think it's the 21st of October.
That sounds right.
So the set may be legal for that, and by then we'll know what reprints are going to be in the set from the previous 2 Red Horizon sets, which will have both rotated out at this time. For sure, by the time Kevin goes to Rockford, we will for sure be playing with Blood Omen, and the old cards will have rotated out. And that's still only 3 weeks after the set release. So it'll be interesting to see, what people are starting to come up with.
Yeah, it'll be the polar opposite of my last time in Rockford, which was an extremely mature format. And yeah, this will be a great new opportunity.
And then November 19th and 20th, we go back to New York for the Poughkeepsie PTC at Champion Card Collector. Hopefully, once again, the meta might be settled down a little bit, aside from any, organized play promos if they start releasing those again. And we'll start to see the maturing format as we get ready to approach the World Championship and what I presume is either going to be in January or February. Now, that's all the events for the year, so we're down to our last 7 PTCs. And it's been quite a year. There's been a lot of events this year. And we'll know after the Poughkeepsie PTC who our player of the year is. And it's been a tight race between Kevin Broberg and Miles Tyler. Kevin is consistently placing very, very high in the events he goes to. Miles consistently makes elimination. He's also more consistent about showing up for the events than Kevin Broberg is.
Yep.
So we'll see if Slow and Steady wins the race in this one.
Nice. Yeah. We'll have to see how that goes. And I think we'll call it a little bit early tonight, guys. We give you 8 minutes of your life back. And
woohoo! We'll see you guys next week, same time and same channel.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.